Hello, everybody. Welcome on to this discussion, including some from our friends from Europe that might be dialing in as well. Right. To introduce everybody, my name is Mark Dragon, MD for Reef Knot Investments, a global supply chain and technology VC firm based out of Singapore. Today, we will be discussing about supply chain visibility, capitalizing on data and analytics to achieve true visibility and to derive benefits from it. Today's session is the first in a series of sessions where we will invite corporate partners to discuss and identify specific areas of gaps and or challenges in a predetermined area, in this case, supply chain visibility. Then we will subsequently open up to startups and those in industry to respond back with potential solutions that might solve part or all of the problems that are highlighted. Right? In subsequent closed roundtable sessions, shortlisted startups will also have the opportunity to discuss those specific challenge areas and potential ways to address that with the corporates. Right? So without further ado, let's dive into the context for today's sessions on supply chain visibility. Right? Today's very dynamic macro environment, think US-China struggles, COVID-19 impacts, right, highlights and pushes a lot of inequalities between the have and have-nots, and this includes supply chain capabilities as well. Right, and then the importance of managing, sensing, and reacting to supply chain disruptions and changes upstream or downstream becomes even more important. So one of the key areas that's seeing a renaissance in the area of supply chain is in the supply chain visibility area. And there are also associated areas around it, like data management, planning, and demand management, etc., that's coming to the forefront. So today, I'm very excited to be discussing with three leaders in their respective areas, the challenges around achieving supply chain visibility, and the opportunities for both startups to address this space, as well as for corporates to understand the innovations happening in this space, and to push forward transformation in these areas. We have Michelle, who's the Global Logistics Vice President in Unilever, with a deep yet varied background of starting off as an OR analyst, so that is interesting, to management consultant, and now heading up global logistics for Unilever. We hope to hear some insights from you, not only from a pure visibility perspective, but also what else this means for Unilever. Saurabh, who's the head for planning in Asia Pacific at Syngenta. So very interested to hear from him about the perspectives of visibility pertaining to agriculture. And even more important to that, I feel, is the commercial impact of better visibility in agriculture. So everybody's talking about traceability and sustainability, but is there like a real commercial impact on addressing the visibility area, right? And finally, Gopal, who's the regional director, Asia Pacific for Prowler. And Gopal comes with very deep supply chain technology experience in this area, with his experiences in Aspen Tech, SAP, Jepson Jessen, and now at Prowler, who's one of the global leaders in probabilistic modeling and reinforcement learning. So looking to hear Gopal's experiences around helping large companies with more traditional enterprise supply chain systems to navigate the new technology and areas that's happening in the startup kind of a space. So welcome to all our panelists, and welcome to all those who are listening in. So to start off with, perhaps I'll start with Michelle, right? So Michelle, what's your perspective of what supply chain visibility means for your business? And what are some of the inherent challenges that you face in this area?
Thanks, Mark. So I will leave to my esteemed colleagues some of the more complex challenges with respect to internal ecosystem complexities around visibility. And I'm going to focus more on the consumer side and what is happening from the consumer perspective in terms of really challenging industry for a lot more visibility to them, with whether it is where's my order or where's my truck, where's my delivery, and how much upstream that is actually pushing and challenging retailers as well as manufacturers to be able to connect that real-time visibility in order to provide the consumer with the visibility that they're looking for. And as a result of everything that is changing in the industry, particularly with consumer trends, one of the things that we are finding more and more demanding is to be able to create pop-up or flex space as quickly as we need it to be able to create that just-in-time order fulfillment management process. So particularly of interest for me is understanding what other type of innovation is coming, where I believe that startups can really break into things. It is to start to look at how can we understand what is available in the industry, in specific markets, in terms of flex capacity, flexible space. And just as we know that there's already digital freight matching that's available in the market, it's more on the fulfillment side, which comes with a lot of different complexities versus warehousing. So the fulfillment side, meaning each picking, packaging, customization, order fulfillment, customization, and delayed differentiation, labeling, stickering, those types of capabilities that are becoming more and more prevalent for consumers who not only want speed, but they want personalization as well. So from that perspective, really understanding what is available in the market now that manufacturers can tap into without having to make large scale investments in terms of fixed or capital investments.
Thanks, Michelle. And in this area on pop-up spaces and flex spaces, right? I think one of the things to think about are the SKUs within those spaces itself, right? So, you know, when we talk about visibility, you know, visibility is very general term, very generic term, right? Yeah, but how do you address that demand part, understanding what kind of demand and therefore what kind of SKUs actually goes into the pop-up stores?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question, and certainly it's going to push and challenge us upstream to understand and have a closer connection in terms of S&OP processes as well as promo planning. But I think where the real magic is going to come from is actually starting to anticipate based on the consumer's online journey. So journey mapping based on whether or not they're buying through marketplace environments and understanding what are they looking at, what are basket sizes, what are basket attach rates for items, and where are you seeing cart abandonment? And so that we can help better anticipate where do we need that space, what are the SKUs that we need to have in those pop-up locations based on where we're seeing carts being abandoned, so that we can start to protect and actually promote where we would have historically seen loss of turnover. So it's really getting in front of it, because otherwise you're just going to continue to chase it. Right,
got it. So I hear a few challenges here, you know, not only the ability to manage those pop-up flex spaces itself, but also the SKUs, you know, understanding the demand patterns of what SKUs should be in those spaces to begin with. So it's a, you know, it's a multi-dimensional kind of a problem.
It is, and if you think about your own experience as a consumer, right? So you know that if you're chasing it, then the demand signal's already probably changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we will be in a much better position to really figure out how do we get closer to what the consumer is interested in based on their shopping and their online customer journey patterns versus the actual click-through or sell-through.
Got it. So I think we will retrace back to this area, you know, around understanding the demand patterns and, you know, the flex spaces, and ultimately, you know, how does what kind of solutions out there that sort of might make sense here. So we'll retrack back here. Let's go into Saurabh, right? How about your perspective, Saurabh, in terms of, you know, for Syngenta, right, more in the agri space? What does visibility mean for you, and what are the kind of key top of mind challenges and areas that you're looking to get addressed?
Sure, Mark. I mean, from agribusiness perspective, I would like to touch upon 2 points here, because agribusiness is highly regulated business. So there's nothing called supply chain flexibility that exists, because to register a product, you need 7 years of data. So you cannot swap from China to US overnight. But what we are looking for is the track and trace from supply perspective, because I would like to go 2 years ago, not just COVID or US-China trade. 2 years ago, one blast happens at one of the China area, chemical production zone, and all factories are shut down for like months. We are not ready for that. We don't know what to do. And China is our 60% sourcing of raw material happens from there. Last year, if I go, suddenly geopolitical issue between India and Pakistan, supply chain disrupt 9th of August, full stop. You can't import any product, and 30% of supply chain for Pakistan is dependent on India. Then this COVID happens. And then US-China trade, which is impacting us for billions and billions of dollars just on duty hikes, and we need to change the supply chain. So can we predict this? No. But can we better ready for this? Yes. We need to act smartly. How you can act smartly? So how we reacted to these situations. Set up a task force, pull all the standardized data from here and there, whatever systems you have, whatever team you have, in 25 days, 30 days, create a cockpit who can make a decision. And so many people are involved in that to make those decisions. What we lost? 30 days. What we lost? So many people working on this as a troubleshooting environment, and we were not ready for that. So, and in our market, as I say, supply chain is not flexible. Now I'll move to the other side of the paradigm shift, the demand side. We are selling insecticide, and insecticide should be available in market when insects are there. If you have heard of pest pressure, the grasshopper comes and goes. If the product is not in farmer's hand at that time, and we are talking farmer who is not next to cold storage, who is not next to an urban city, and we are talking 4 level of channels, the distributor, the retailer, the small retailer in the village, and it's not US or Europe where you have big size customers. These are small holders. So they are buying 5 ml, 10 ml bottles. So we need to deliver the product in time to the farmer, otherwise we lose a year. So if I would have made a decision, not after 30 days, but on the first 5th day, because I was having smart data, not the standardized data of where my product is, what I can do with the stock, where I can move, what is happening. And I will be having a little bit of predictive analytics around my demand side, which we also struggle. So as you asked in the beginning, how we bring value to the customer side. So as I said, it's highly regulated because we are a product company and product is the king. Imagine there are 10 counterfeit products roaming around in market with the same packaging and everything, and farmer gets confused with those products. And 4 level of channels I'm having, the channel inventory sitting over there, and I have no clue what is the amount of that inventory. Do I need to deliver it today or do I need to deliver 7 months later? So these 2 pieces are the big puzzles. On one side, I can't change my supply chain, but I need to make a smart decision. On the other side, I need to bring in some predictive analytics with the data, which can bring the external factor also in. So it's the channel inventory that is sitting in the future in market, or the weather, or how the macroeconomic indicator is going to impact my demand. If we can bring all those things from customer perspective, yes, we can make a better decision. That's how I would like to summarize.
Thanks, Rob. So I heard a couple of things, right? So like what you said, that whole smart data and smart decision part of it, right? So because your supply chain is pretty much, it has been there, it's kind of fixed, it's kind of long term, right? So how do you actually get all the data coming in and to be able to make a decision at that point in time, right? And given that there's a lot of macro India, Pakistan, India, China type thing going on, right? To be able to have all the data on hand to be able to make it, right? You also mentioned the counterfeit thing and the inventory piece, which is it goes back to the commercial related question. So I'll come back to you, Saurabh, especially when it comes to I'm sure that in your organization you've tried many different ways of looking at data and working with vendors to provide that control tower, provide that data management. So what is it that actually is that issue? So I'll come back to you on that piece. How about Gopal, right? From your perspective, right? Supply chain visibility, and you heard from both Michelle and Saurabh as well, right? I'm sure you have many other large-scale clients, that that have a similar kind of issues and challenges around visibility. What's your perspective of the couple of key challenges that industry faces when it comes to visibility?
Well, I think if I would take a step at the definition of visibility, I would say it's about having factual, real-time information and also having an ability to control the information that you can access to. Because what happens today is, taking an example from my experience consulting for larger companies, right? They've got multitude of systems. It's not one system. They got a couple of systems doing the backend ERP. They could have something else doing optimization, something else doing on the, if they have AI machine learning kind of decision engine, right? So it depends. And of course, that topic is still pretty early days, right? But what happens is most of the companies, right, they don't even have a single source of truth in data. Everything that you want to be, you're talking about visibility, the cornerstone of visibility is data. So you need to have factual data, right? So it's relevant, it's real time, so that you make the right decisions. So a lot of companies are actually struggling with being able to get the single source of data first because of the multitude type of systems. The mid-sized companies that I've also dealt with, they have lesser challenges because they have one system. But what they have, the problem that they face is the mid-sized companies do not invest in maybe very good systems. So there is a question on integrity of the data, right? And do they have people watching over the governance of data, managing, making sure that all the data that flows through to decision makers are all relevant, clean? And that's always a challenge in the mid-sized companies, right? So I think in terms of how traditional ways of solving supply chain issues, right, they have, and I would say I would look at supply chain from the supply chain planning solutions and the supply chain execution. And backend ERP just gives you the data. So when you look at supply chain planning, so Saurabh talked about demand planning and stuff, it's very important to have the right tools to be able to predict demand. After which, then you look at your supply. And with COVID, a lot of the customers I'm talking to now, they were impacted just like Saurabh, because if your raw materials comes from China, and most of the primary drug manufacturers, right, they are also sourcing from China, and they suddenly felt a complete stop in their production. So you are affected. And can you do a lot about that? Actually, it's quite difficult, right? You have to move a whole capex investment of a plant from China to elsewhere. Though they are looking for alternative sourcing, but manufacturing is tough. So it would also depend on the type of companies that we are dealing with as well in the supply chain. When it comes to execution, you have another challenge, right? With transportation management, with last mile delivery. So, and today, a lot of companies are going e-commerce as well. So I think you will be reading a lot of information about last mile delivery, and that last mile delivery also contributes to visibility, real timeness, and factual. I think the trend is now going towards master data governance, where you have to now have the right source of data, accurate and in real time. And this is, a lot of big companies are actually going back to fundamentals because they realize that they've been dealing with systems for a long period of time. We're used to it. They work around errors in data. You have people in Excel sheet, making those changes and giving to the supply chain directors, sales directors, marketing directors, and then they will make a kind of an prediction based on hindsight. But you cannot continue this way. A 5 percentage point drop in supply source can impact your manufacturing downstream in a big way. It's not 5%, So I think in terms of systems, there are companies that looking at really appropriate technologies now to solve those. You look at accessing data, making sure the data is cleansed, and there are tools now. And the reason why things are a lot more better today is because of compute power. The compute power on the cloud allows you to do a lot more stuff using AI technologies as well. So with be it IoT agents, blockchain agents, they all are feeded, and the feeder data, if they are done and managed very well, then you can actually do predictions much better.
Thanks, Gopal. And this question is to all the panelists, right? What do you think is the core? What is the core challenge, right? And we hear, during today's session that there's, from Gopal, the whole single source of truth. right? The origination of data and how it's cleansed, centralized, a standard perspective of looking at data. Is that the problem? Or is it the problem that you have that base data and you're trying to make use of that data through either, predictions or insights generated out of it? Or is it a change management, type issue? In your organization, what's your perspective of the key issues?
Let me try on this one. I mean, when I call data, I describe it in two ways. One is internal, the other one is external. We are good with our internal data. I mean, we have spent billions and billions of dollars in last so many years, right, for the big organization, and they have all sort of systems, different type of ERP analytics, and also internal data we have. And most of the time when you reach out to any big consultancy or even startup, they can pull this internal data and make something great out of it. No doubt to that, right? But then I have another data, which is external data, which is my downstream suppliers data. They are not as rich or as cash rich as we are. They can't invest in those kind of system and tool to provide us the data. The second is my customer. My customer is not running on ERP systems and everything. They cannot give you just like that whatever data you need. So my 25% of my suppliers, which are raw material suppliers, and 25% data which is linked to my customer, which are growers and retailers, that data goes for a toss all the time. So whatever decision we make, whether we in our SNOP meetings on monthly basis, whether in a budgeting conversation on yearly basis, it's most of the decisions are made on internal data, which we are good in it. So what we need how we tap on this external data, which is sitting in fragmented ways, different ways, right? And we need to think of what kind of investment we make and what kind of investment we expect the customer or the supplier to make, how easy to configure in small geography, small market, how easy to use. Can I use with my phone and scan it and give the data and feed into my ERP system? Or is it complex Salesforce.com that you need to implement and then 10 people are struggling how to enter data over there and spending $100 million for that investment? So that's why. So that external data is a question mark. How easily we can get that data in our whole pool and how quickly and smart decision we can make. That's how I'll put it, the challenge we have.
And thanks, Rob. Michelle, how about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a couple of things, and you're in a different position than we are, Saurav. So our internal data, Unilever is a conglomeration of a number of different markets, number one, right? So we have disparate systems across our markets. Then you add into that the fact that we've grown through acquisitions. So now you're layering in a number of other companies who had completely different systems that are even more disparate now. But I think one of the additional complexities to the management and the governance of your master data is the fact that different personas need to use that data in different ways, and they need to look at that data and slice it in a number of different angles. So I think it's the normalization and the stratification of that data that is equally important as the management and the governance of it. How should this data be used if you are this persona type? And then exactly to Saurav's same point, the integration with external providers, whether they're suppliers to us or on-pack suppliers for us, or it's retailers and other customers that we're integrating with, as well as 3PLs, 4PLs, equally important to make sure that how we start to look at that data, get it integrated in order for us to be able to normalize it is a really big challenge. And I know this is not new, right? That this is very long-standing industry challenges that, that as Gopal has already spoken about, the investments that are required for companies to tackle this. It's not the sexy stuff, right? Especially when you have a lot of new innovative things that are coming that you want to be able to invest in, to be able to stand back and say that these are the brilliant basics that we need to have in our organization in order for us to be able to grow. It's a big step for a company. So it's fully understandable how you got there, how we got there. The question is, do you want to make that investment, or do you want to figure out how do you layer something in over top of all of these disparate systems in order to make sense of it?
Thanks, Michelle. And I think you sort of touched on the different types of complexity, right? Which is the Unilever type, which is that multiple different business units, geographies, and because of that, the use is actually slightly different as well, right? The supply chains run probably, there's different characteristics of the supply chains, right? And so each of them is almost like a layer by itself, right? Yeah. So then lies the complexity, I think. And to your point, the disparate systems, the integration, I think that is what we see as well. One of the issues around just having that standardized data on the back end to sort of make decisions, to even come up with some insights, like basic insights. I think that's also a problem, right? Gopal, any perspectives here? Because you have been in this space as well, and talking about the what kind of insights can be generated, from, can any insights be generated from very little data? or do you have a perspective to say that, we need to have a standardized, a normalized data on the back end, then we can move ahead with the next step? What's your perspective here?
Yeah, I will answer that question. Before that, Saurav brought up a very interesting point about suppliers and customers, right? Getting data. So I had a consulting gig a couple of years ago with a very big retailer, and they have 100,000 suppliers, right? They're very big. They've got multiple chains and stuff. And so in one of the sessions, right, we were talking about how to be able to get data information from suppliers reliability. And like what Michelle also said, right, these suppliers are small suppliers. The 100,000 suppliers, if you segregate them, I think 60% of them were very small, not mom and pop shop, but small. So what they did was they offered a solution using Adobe, a very simple solution calling Adobe, where they have a kind of a read-write form to allow the suppliers to punch in the replenishment of materials, right? And of course, the retailer can choose the number that he selects. It's very simple. It's just an Adobe form, and they know by suppliers what are the products they supply, and the merchandisers will go through it quickly, and they just have to enter in, right? Everything, the data comes from the retailer. The master data is all fixed, so suppliers cannot change anything on the master data. They just can include the quantity and the date of delivery, and they overcome this huge challenge of a mom and pop shop being able to give that data. So that it's about being very creative here, right? And I mean, I didn't come up with the solution. It was just that the customer was asking, is there a way we can actually, form feed them with a simple system so I get my data? I said yes. So we did a very simple thing, and you can actually do it vice versa as well with customers who do not have those solutions. Coming back to your question about data being sparse, right? And that's one of the main challenges today. And companies that specializes in AI machine learning actually address that. So you have sparsity, you got skewness of data. You have now with COVID, you have another kind of a trend and patterns that you need to start recognizing. But would it be repeated? You wouldn't know. And you can actually save algorithms that actually read from COVID patterns and say you can store them, and you can decide maybe I could actually release them, and I can hear a human input expert to say it will not be exactly 100% of COVID, it can be 60% of COVID impact, and see what, and that comes to simulation. So the ability for you to simulate and look at what can happen. And you can also bring in external data, but you need to also have mindful about having the ETL kind of tools to cleanse data, right? So that when it comes into the area space of using the algorithms, it has to be clean, right? Otherwise, it will give you exceptions and stuff like that, but you would take time to react to it. So it's not an easy task to overcome. I think if I were to advise clients, they have to take a step-by-step approach, take what is really critical first, solve the data problems over time, make sure the outcome is correct, and then refine the algorithm and the expected outcome, and you will be able to get a more seamless supply chain optimized end-to-end view system as well.
Thanks, Gopal. The next question I have is for Michelle.
Mark, do you mind if I add something to that as well?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question, and it's something that we've talked a lot about internally as well. I think what's happening, at least for Unilever, as well as many of the colleagues that I'm talking to in the industry, we're learning how to do more with less data, right? So where we used to need 80% or we used to need 90% in order to make a decision, we're learning how to deal with 40, 50%. And I'll give you a really good example. Obviously, in the peak of COVID, where port and border closures and delays were just, well, they're still moving, right? It's still an unknown aspect of what's happening right now. We had to figure out and we had to make decisions of where are we going to source from, where are we going to produce now, where we were in the positions to be able to do that. And you just have to make a decision and go and really start to build your supply chain to a place where it has more agility in order to be able to do that, rather than figuring out how do I get that reliability by data back up to 80 or 90%. So I think it's another way that companies are starting to learn how to cope differently.
Thanks, Michelle. I was actually getting exactly to that, right? The question that I was going to pose to yourself and to Saurabh was around, how much of that basic fundamentals need to be built versus building it as you go, right? Especially in a multi-business unit region kind of environment like yours, you can't wait for that foundation to be fully firm, but those individuals. So how much of that actually happens, right? What are the constraints for that happening? And Saurabh, I'd like to have your perspective after this as well, right? Do you build it as you go? That means there's demand and there's the business units drive innovations, or do you need to fix the back end stuff first and then you sort of move on, right, Michelle?
Yeah, I think there's some absolute foundational pieces that you need. What nodes do you have? What SKUs do you have? Price, pretty much, the basics. As I said, we are definitely learning how to work in an agile environment for sure, being much more comfortable with a minimum viable product to be able to test and go and course correct much faster. So I think what we consider the minimum standards is also being challenged and evaluated. So that we are really pushing ourselves to understand exactly what do we really need to have so that we can be much more reactive to things that are changing.
Got it. And when you get into this test and go environment, do you see it, does the organization see it in terms of higher value goods, lower volume tends to have a different way of looking at it versus the more voluminous and lower value type, or is it generally the same perspective as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly I can't speak for everyone, but I think every business model needs to evaluate that, right? What are your drivers? Is it growth? Is it share? Is it margins? What is it on itself? So hard to answer that one specifically. I do think that what is really important is to ask those questions. You're not chasing every single order, so that you're very clear on which are the ones that we must have, or what are some of the things that we absolutely cannot fail on, and how do you insulate and protect around those. I can tell you that one of the things that we're really doubling down on, which is where that external integration becomes more and more prevalent, is in order for us to focus on the things that are important for us in our growth, we're learning how to outsource a lot more. Not only outsourcing the transactions and the activities, but a lot more of the thinking around how do we build some of these capabilities to very important strategic partners of ours. So I think that is another layer to be considering, and then how do you build that dependency and that strategic partnership with providers to get them to understand what you need in terms of visibility, so that you can focus on what it is that is core to your business.
Oh, thanks. I think this, it seems like this whole environment has forced organizations to confront, really realities, right? What are they strong at, what they're good at, and keep to it, and everything else, work with partners who might be better in those areas than yourself. I think that's actually very good to hear. So how about your perspective?
I mean, kind of echo to that. So we have also kind of outsourced many of the activities which we are not good at. Like we have the 4PL dedicated model. So all Maersk manages our all shipments across globe. The other thing is that we are ready to make mistakes because anyways, world is volatile. So whatever you do, you will be wrong. So do we go with the big bang approach for any big transformation nowadays? No, it doesn't work. We have learned it. We have burnt our finger, our money and everything. So whatever makes sense. So that's why in every problem, the minimum viable product that's set needs to be defined, and then we improve on that. So all these, are we going to change the world altogether? No. Can I fix a problem in Myanmar market for this my profitable product, which is sourced from China? Open for that. If we can fix that, we can replicate it in many other supply chains and many other markets and make money out of that. So that's the approach. So agile methodology, now it's engraved. You 80-20 rule is there. You do the time boxing. You don't sit on a project and do big bang ERP implementation for 7 years. No, we are not doing that. But yeah, if somebody has something which can deliver in next 10 to 12 weeks, which makes sense, and we can try it out, open for that. That's the methodology we are using.
And thanks, Rob. I have a question coming in from the listeners as well. Now, before we get there, I just want to ask Michelle, Gopal, and Saurabh, after we address that question, let's talk about that whole strategic imperative thing, right? We touched on it a little bit to say, what are the foundational pieces. Agile is important, right? Big bang does not work. We need to be faster to adapt to market. But really, what are the strategic imperatives, right? And when considerations for strategic partners, like Michelle, you mentioned, come about, what are those kind of considerations, right? Because the strategic partners can be the large multinationals, or they can potentially be the small innovation partners type of a thing. So maybe I'll reserve that for after this question, but just do think about that topic. Now the Q&A coming in is actually to Saurabh. So Saurabh, I'm good. Okay, you mentioned that we can't predict black swan events, but we can prevent it. Not sure if you mentioned that you can prevent it. Would it be possible to share an example of how you've mitigated or minimized the risk around black swan events?
I'm not sure whether we can prevent it or not, but how we mitigate, see, in these kind of, it costs money. Can you mitigate it? Yes, I can share an example. Overnight, India, Pakistan, one supply disruption happened. It costed us money. How? We need to set up a team in regulatory environment to talk to Pakistan government so that they can give us registration for the existing sources we have. And we were having only 6 months time because wheat crop is in November, December. And if you don't deliver the product, we are going to lose millions and millions of dollars. We flew 4 chartered planes from US to Pakistan just to deliver the product on time. And it costed $2.5 million. So it costs money in these situations. So can we prevent it? No. So that's why the days, as I said in the beginning, the days we lose to collect the data, to find how we can mitigate this, it costs money day by day. So a smart cockpit of data who can tell us when somebody's locking the door, where are we? What can we do from all front? So then we can move the workforce or the people or the expert or the systems to make that happen. So can we prevent it? No. Can we better ready for this? Yes. I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Let me ask a follow-on question to you, Sarah. Yes, we can't prevent black swan events, but we can, we can sort of manage around it, right? And one of the topics that we've been thinking about, I've been thinking about, has been the area of IoT sensors versus non-sensors, right? That means having actually real-time visibility and dynamic visibility versus just purely data from the systems itself, right? Saurabh and Michelle, what's your perspective on the importance of these kind of dynamic visibility versus just trusting that, or not having that outbound from the warehouse into inbound from the distribution center further down the road kind of a thing, right? So how important is that level of visibility for you?
When you say dynamic visibility of macro indicators, you're talking the
No,
external
not
environment?
necessarily. It's actually where goods are at any point in time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would link it to, so as I said, when we sell, the customer whom we invoice, which is distributor, afterwards where the product goes, we have very limited visibility. And sometimes we find the product we invoiced last year is still sitting in channel and farmer hasn't consumed it. And we are producing a big season in our factories in the hope that we'll be again doing the same volume that we did. But actually the demand generation activity at the ground didn't happen. Maybe competitor pushed the product more, or maybe competitor did the demand generation activity, or farmer bought something else, or maybe farmer is not even growing corn. It has switched to cotton, and which we are not even aware of that because people are not at the ground. So those information are not visible to us, which is critical to make any decision.
Michelle, how about yourself?
Yeah, slightly different world from us because we are closer to the different points in the channel. But I think that the point that Saurabh is making is absolutely spot on. It depends at which point in the channel you're working with that's going to determine that level of criticality. Right? So you've got 4 weeks of inventory sitting in your warehouses before you actually get to the channel versus the channel is carrying another 2. Yeah, it's different level of criticality. For us, again, as I started out the conversation, our consumers are certainly pushing our retailers for more visibility in terms of where is my truck? Not just what is the status of my order, it hasn't shipped yet. It's literally what road is my truck on? So I think for us, really driving that, no pun intended, that visibility to understand exactly what vehicle is it on. And by the way, is that vehicle green? Is it electric? Yeah. So all of these components to be able to provide that visibility back down to consumers, because we know that that's what they're shopping and that's what they're buying. So yeah, it's very important for us.
I think that's a nice point on that, right? Which is consumer led, right? Because us as consumers and think e-commerce, right? There's an expectation of visibility, right? Where is my truck? I want to see it going past this road at this point in time, right? But whereas if you look in the B2B world, that's certainly not the case, right? That's certainly.
Think about what's changing in B2B. B2B is now starting to react to what's happening in B2C.
Yes.
So as our traditional customers are now offering more things like buy online, pick up in store, or they're offering more, direct to consumer deliveries, where it doesn't necessarily have to be the manufacturer directly. We have to now partner with our retailers differently, whether it's mom and pop shop. And William, I'm going to respond to your question in the chat in a minute, or it's big box. So depending if you're an emerging market or a mature market, you really do need to think about what is the different type of visibility that you have to make to your customers so that they can make that available to their consumers.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. And I think with that, it's a nice little segue into that chat, into the question that is coming from some listeners. 2 related questions, and I think it might be more related to Michelle, but Saurabh, please also feel free. First question is, are you investing in mom and pop traditional trade retailers in order to help you obtain more concrete, accurate data? So how do you work with those retailers? And the second question is that how do you use your trade marketing and sales staff to capture the stock on hand data at the retailers, then cross-reference against sales in data where it's a direct sale retailer? So maybe, Michelle, maybe have a go at it. So if you have any points of view there, happy to hear as well.
Yeah, sure. We certainly are investing in the mom and pop shops and our general trade or distributed trade channel. not only from the perspective of, the world is changing and we need more data for ourselves to understand, but also because we see a tremendous value. And so there are a number of different apps that are being created to make it much more accessible for them to be able to place their orders directly in an app that where the administrative burden for them becomes a lot simpler as well. So I think the investment is a very worthwhile journey to investigate if that's not something that you're already doing. Again, not only for the benefit of the retailers, but also for your own benefit and having that direct integration and that point of demand, that signal coming directly into you. When it comes to how do you use that data, or how do you set the expectation of what is the stock on hand, it is very much done at our trade spend level. So we certainly do use our trade spend dollars, euros, whichever currency you're in, to incentivize that integration back. But certainly, the more mature markets that we're dealing with as well, it becomes a bare necessity. So especially in markets where we're doing vendor managed inventory, we've got direct access to that information. But it's certainly becoming more and more of a minimum standard expectation for the major retailers to understand that in order for us to be able to assure service to them as well.
And a follow-on question there, Michelle, which is in this space, there are many startups that are coming out that are, they're trying to address this space, right? Which is basically data from traditional trade, right? The retailers that has been traditionally a bit more difficult to get, right? So what are the kind of solutions that you've seen, and what are still some kind of challenges that you face in this area?
Well, I think the number one piece is when your point of sale, not necessarily electronic, which we see in many markets. And that is where the real challenge with the mom and pop shops comes in, that signal back to us in terms of what is the order versus an expectation of what they're carrying on hand, and then you essentially have to imply what is that sell through, because you're not getting that point of sale demand. So I think that's really the piece that becomes the biggest challenge that you need to find a way through, which is again where those apps become more and more important for us to be able to connect.
Thanks. I think that's certainly quite interesting. We are on the lookout for such solutions as well as an investor.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say on it is the concept of the microservices, right? Very important, so that those apps are not beasts for operators to run. Really, really important. However, there is also a really nice simplistic way to be able to offer something up that does multiple things. So as I said, being able to offer track and trace services, so where's my order, as well as how green is that delivery, and then as you do the delivery, would you like to place another order? So something along those lines to be able to fully integrate all three of those really important components to the business together in microservices that make it fast and easy to run would be a really great idea if somebody wants to go make that for you.
I'd like to hear that whole, that whole, consumers asking for track and trace, they get it, and they get other stuff as well. Right. So that's a nice little value addition, right? So Rob, how about your perspective, right, on this space?
Aligned with that, we also tried with the go further one level down, which is dealer management system we implemented in many of the countries. And see, loyalty works with us. I mean, what is the ideal world for us? That we know which farmer is consuming our product so that we can share the value. And value is not just dollar, but the health, safety, and environment. We are selling chemicals. I mean, it needs to be used perfectly so that it doesn't harm the environment. And that's the ideal world for us. But where are we? Distributor, then maybe dealer in few of the geographies. Then I have retailer, and then maybe I'm lucky that farmer or retailer and farmer. So it's far from us. And they don't have that much of technology access, let me put that way, right? Yes, phones are there nowadays. They use some of the apps here and there, but if you go to a farmer in Thailand and Indonesia and in Orissa in India, they have a limited reach. So whatever can work in those kind of environment, which is simple, easy, and can give us basic data so that we know who our farmer is, then yes, we can share the value over there. That's what we are looking forward to.
Gopal, any perspectives here from yourself in terms of the trade related area, right? Distributors and retailers and the information coming in. You already gave some perspective on the Adobe example. Maybe we'll influence Adobe stocks later this evening in the US. I doubt so. But any perspectives around the data perspective, right? And can you use whatever small little data to come up with some insights?
Yeah, I actually can relate to a real assignment in Vietnam where we were doing, I was working with an SAP consulting firm, and it was for a secondary drug manufacturer, local Vietnamese. It's got its FDA approvals and stuff, so they're pretty good. I think they were number 1 or number 2 in Vietnam. And what they wanted to do was to be able to give their sales managers on the ground a kind of a dashboard on an iPad. So they will have all the historical information of sales to a particular dealer. They would actually approach them, talk to them, and get those figures, right? So they will also rectify, knowing that the guy's got enough stock, and the guy actually, normally what you will do is there's a traditional way to predict and say every month he makes a purchase of 100. But now, he's got stock on hand, you are actually on site. But it's an 80-20 rule. They had about close to 300 outlets, drug pharmacies. So what they did was they just went into the main guys who contribute 80% of the revenues. And they had this simple iPad kind of a solution. It's a mobile solution, mobile device. And they just collected those information and they rectified it. So whatever kind of traditional predictions or forecasts they were doing, these numbers will override, because then you know that the particular dealer has still got stocks. So I would say that was, and we took a very simple, straightforward solution. The data comes from SAP, and then of course it's like a simplified dashboard. And then you go, if I'm a sales rep and I got to cover 30 of them over a period of 2-3 weeks, they will do that. And then immediately it goes back to the sales and operational planning meeting for the next 3 months kind of a thing. So it's a kind of a rolling thing. And then they use that. And then the sales manager, sales director would have a lot more information. So I wouldn't say very real time, because it takes time to go down to the ground, but actually they started in a very small way. And this was about a couple of years ago, a story that I'm narrating to you. So there are solutions there, and it's not SAP, it was something else. Very simple, fleet-footed solution. And I'm sure a lot of startups today can do something like that very easily.
Okay, so we're running out of time very soon, but there's one question I would like that has popped up that would be interesting to answer. So the question is, and this is for everybody, the question is the current supply chain visibility discussion has been centered around demand and supply fulfillment, right? So what about supply chain visibility for sustainable sourcing? Or, I'll just, you can address it using sustainable sourcing or sourcing in general, right? So visibility upstream. How critical is this information for businesses, and to what extent progress has been done in this area? So maybe, Saurabh, I'll ask you to have a go first, and Michelle a bit later. It's up to you whether you want to answer in the context of sustainable sourcing or just sourcing. Yeah.
I mean, I do agree. This is one of the most critical pieces, the sustainability. There's no doubt to that. And sustainability is not just that our supply chain is not disruptive, but sustainability from health, environment, and safety perspective also. So it's not just that there should not be any disruptions to have multiple suppliers, but the supplier that I'm choosing are really fitting to what I'm looking forward to as an environment and society and safety. So that's the critical piece. The other piece is also that in our kind of business, like on the customer side also. So if I would like my packaging not to be misused afterwards. So I'm selling some chemicals which should be sprayed all over. I don't want somebody in the farm just cut the cap and uses a drinking water bottle. I don't want that. I want that to be disposed properly or return it back. And like in China, now the government regulations are saying you need to pick those packaging material back. And there is an incentive linked to that. So we have done QR codes, 2D barcodes, which can be scanned and those can be returned back. So it's the both ways we need to bring the sustainable solution, not just in our packaging, but tracking and tracing backwards also, so that we don't create a hazardous substance around there. So that's how I'll put it. It's one of the critical thing to adopt. Yeah.
How about Michelle, on your side, in terms of visibility when it comes to sourcing or sustainable sourcing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if we just focus on the business continuity piece of it, it's absolutely critical. And I think we all experienced the pain of that during COVID, that if you don't have that direct connection, and I don't necessarily mean direct connection with each and every supplier, but the integration to be able to understand where your suppliers are. It's painful. It's very painful, and it leads to a tremendous amount of business waste. So from the commercial perspective, or from the profitability perspective of an organization, the downstream impact on waste as a result of air freighting, exactly as you called out before, Saurabh, to maintain business continuity, you end up doing things that you wouldn't normally do. So the question is, do you have the visibility in terms of your cost to serve models to understand what trade-offs you want to make? How long can I be down in certain areas? At which point does it make sense for me to start air freighting, or does it not make sense for me to start air freighting? And I think that that's how we start to get in front of some of those black swans, is by activating that cost to serve model and running a number of simulations on an ongoing basis to understand that tipping point, and to be able to have those business partnering conversations with the rest of the organization, supply chain, that says, what decisions are we collectively going to make together?
Got it. Thanks, Michelle. Gopal, any perspective around, on the upstream side of things, right? When it comes to sustainable sourcing side, right, and importance of visibility in that kind of a space.
I mean, I'm engaged in some assignments here where, to be able to predict demand, for example, is becoming critical now. And as a function of that, they need to be also very resilient in understanding supply sources, like what, Michelle also mentioned. And now what they also do is you have to, technically address this by saying, what are the sourcing options, and what do I do? And because, there are many suppliers, right, who might actually be very small and might not be even relevant, and they might not be out of business as well. So this part on supplier sustainability has an impact and score on suppliers who can actually be very reliable, whether it be cost, be it quality, timeliness, and all. So I think there's an element of now monitoring and scoring them as well, scoring suppliers as well. So this is going to become very critical, and you need to have data to be able to analyze those as well. And you can, analyze them by saying how predictable. They could be a bit more costly, but then they could be closer to you in terms of supply chain, time-wise, transit time-wise, right? So you have now ability to form the demand forecast, then predict if I need certain sources, supply sources, what do I do? What are the options I have? And you have to now monitor this more, I think, more constantly now, because you need to really know, you don't want to get more disruptions, especially in a supply source, especially with black swan events and all. So there's going to be a lot more requirement for technology to address this as well.
Okay, thanks everybody. And 1 hour passes very quickly. We're kind of out of time. So I'll just do a quick wrap up right now, and then I'll pass it to Omar for a 1 minute closing. So today's session, we discussed actually a very broad range of topics. Yes, it's all under supply chain visibility. We discussed the demand sensing piece of it, flex spaces that Michelle brought up, the importance of the data piece of it, right? A single source of truth, integration, right? That whole, is real time needed or not? I feel that we could have gone a little bit more into that, but I think it's a topic for another day. And of course, how do you manage data from the downstream side of things, from retail coming back to you, right? And how do you sort of rationalize it and build insights of it for the business moving forward? I think those are some of the general areas that I captured. I think there's a lot of need for us as we think through around the next steps after this, which is, what are the 2 or 3 areas among the topics that discussed today that we can move forward with. And with that, we will feed it back to the industry. What are those areas, and invite the industry then to propose their kind of approaches for those areas. And anyway, Michelle, Saran, and Gopal, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Oma, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much for moderating such an amazing and engaging panel. And thanks to all of you guys, all the panelists to join us today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Like Mark said, we would be having smaller follow-on sessions. So if you are a startup or if you have solutions to some of the challenges that we've discussed today, please do write back to us. You can see there's a feedback form. If there were any questions that we were not able to get to, feel free to put them in the feedback form and we'll get in touch with you through email. Keep following Level 3. We're doing more and more stuff around supply chain and logistics. It is one of our very focused areas. And join us for the next sessions. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye. See you guys.